Hey guys, and welcome back to the Spruce and Linen channel. I'm Janelle, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We're here in my kitchen and we're going to naturally dye a woven wall hanging. So I made this woven wall hanging. I thought the camera was recording, by the way, and it wasn't, so I've already started. So I'm going to explain what is happening so far. So hopefully you can see this little woven wall hanging. I used our diamond twill tutorial pattern to do this. You can find the tutorial here. I'll put it somewhere up here. And if you sign up for my email list at spruceandlinen.com, you can get that free PDF pattern as well. So we're going to dye this little woven wall hanging. I made it out of 100% cotton warp string, which is the black stuff that we sell in the Etsy shop. And I used Bernat Handicrafter cotton yarn for the fringe and the weft and everything else. You're going to want to use completely natural fibers for this project. Because polyester and those kinds of things will not dye permanently with natural dyes. So in this pot here, I have filled it with water and then I put a cup of vinegar in it. This is called scouring your fabric or yarn. And what this does is it essentially just cleans it so that the dye will adhere evenly to it. Most yarns and fabrics that you buy in a store have some sort of sizing or pesticide in it so that when it's in transit, it doesn't get bugs and whatnot in it. So this is essentially just going to help clean all of that off and any dirt that might have been on it as well. And the other thing is when you've pre-soaked whatever you're dyeing, it's going to dye a lot more evenly. In this pot, I have quite a concoction. I wanted to do this project with stuff that you probably already have at home or can easily access at this weird time. So in this pot is simply just, I filled it with water. I put, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I put 10 bags of black tea or orange pekoe tea in here. I put 1.5 cups of mixed berries. Just this Kirkland brand mixed berries. It has blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries in it. And then I ended up throwing in another 1/2 cup of blueberries, just these little wild blueberries, just to get a little bit more orange. So the great thing about these things I chose to dye with is that tea, orange pekoe tea, this won't really work with herbal tea, it needs to be orange pekoe. It already naturally has tannins in it. So tannins are what makes the dye adhere to the fabric or the yarn in this case. So that's the nice thing about a tea bag. You don't have to have some other additive that you have to put in here because this is going to do that. And berries also tend to dye really well on their own as well. So right now we're essentially just like cooking our dye. So we want to let this simmer for about an hour so that we get we're just extracting the color out of these things, and then we will strain it and then we will dye. This part, the scouring your fabric or yarn, you want to do for about at least half an hour. I'm probably just gonna do these at the same amount of time. This, you can't do it too much. So, and then with your dye, we just don't want to get, and we don't need to get like a crazy high boiling point. We just want to kind of just let it simmer and cook, if you will, to get our color. And then in this pot, I also put just a little wad of the yarn that I used to weave this project so that I can test out the dye before we go in and dye the whole wall hanging and are unsure of the color. So that's what I'm doing so far. So right now we're going to just kind of keep letting this stuff simmer, and then I will come back and show you the next step. So if I didn't mention it before, this scouring process, we just want to get to a simmering point. We don't want it to be that big rolling boil. We just want it to be kind of steaming and like little bubbles, but you don't need to go any hotter than that. The tea and berries have been simmering for a sufficient amount of time, so we're ready to sort of start actually dyeing this woven wall hanging. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I just have this scrap piece of silk from when I used to do a lot of dyeing, but you could use a piece of cotton or an old t-shirt. Just keep in mind it is going to get dyed in this process, so don't use something that you don't want to be stained. So I'm gonna wet it down a little bit. And I'm going to line my colander with that fabric. And this will just ensure that none of those little tiny berry pieces are going to get through in my final pot of dye. I'm gonna get another bowl or pan. Straight into this. All right, so I just have my big instant pot to strain the dye into. I'm probably going to still dye with this pot, but you need something to strain it into. That's not gonna work. Bigger colander. That fits perfectly. Okay. Very carefully, I'm going to start pouring this into my strainer. And then I'm going to just rinse this pot out so that I can use it again for the actual dyeing. Just making sure all those little bits of berry are out of the pot. And then you're gonna have to move your fabric around a little bit probably with all that berry in there to just kind of let it strain through. But I'm gonna set this aside for a moment and let that continue to strain through. And then we're going to rinse the actual weaving and get that onto a dowel so that we can kind of suspend it. You can't see the bar that's hanging right here, but we have a mic stand set up so we can suspend the weaving, because what I want to do is sort of get that variegated effect. You guys know I love that. So we're doing like a dip dye, and we're gonna slowly take it further and further out of the water so that the darkest color is at the bottom and the lightest color is at the top. So I'm going to carefully remove this from here. Just gonna use this pot here. Don't forget that fabric's gonna be real hot right now. And I'm just making sure that we're rinsing all that vinegar out of the weaving. And I'm just squeezing any excess water. This yarn is going to be sufficiently soaked through now that the dye is going to go on there pretty evenly, so we can squeeze out a little bit of water. And then I'm just making sure my space is clean and not full of berries so we don't get any random weird spots of dye on our wall hanging. And then I just have a scrap dowel. I left my weaving with these nice big loops on the top so that I could use this dowel for dyeing, and then later on I can string it and sew it onto another dowel to finish it off. And our dye has now strained through. So I'm gonna pour it back into this other pot. Remove this. Now I have the original yarn that I used to weave this, just so that I can rig up this stand for this weaving. You want to turn your pot of dye back on, probably about medium temperature, because we're going to do this all under heat. So I'm going to tie this onto this bar up here, so then we can literally dip it all the way in, and then I'll let it go for a few minutes at a time, and we'll slowly lift it out to get that light to dark effect. Okay, so I'm gonna probably give this about 10 minutes at each height. So I'm starting with it all the way in. The top isn't quite in the pot, and then I'm just gonna time it and just slowly in increments lift it out. While this is in the pot all the way and the fringe is touching the bottom of the pot, every once in a while you're gonna wanna go in and just stir the bottom of your pot so that you don't get any hot spots. And hot spots happen when the yarn is touching the surface of the bottom of the pot and it gets extra hot down there because that's where the burner is, and it'll kind of create these almost really dark splotches. So every once in a while you just want to stir that around and make sure it's not getting too hot in one spot there. This is done being dyed now, so I'm gonna take it off of this, rinse it out, dry it, and finish it off, and I will show you it when it's done. Here is the finished result. It's definitely not perfect, but I have a couple of takeaways if you want to try this at home of things that to improve on compared to what I did. So as you can see, I didn't really get that variegated effect I wanted, but I think the problem was dipping it all the way in. Because it was already wet, I think I could have just had it about halfway into the dye, and the dye would have slowly climbed up, but kind of unevenly. So then that would have given me more of that variegated effect. But all in all, I really like this color. It's very neutral and earthy, and I think it looks really pretty. Again, that was berries and tea. I think in the end I had 10 bags of tea, about 3 cups of the mixed berries, and half a cup of the blueberries. So that resulted in this. Next time I'll probably go a little bit more of an accurate route, actually weighing the piece and figuring out an exact calculation so that the color can be more something out of my dye book. Basically more vibrant and using different foods. But this is a really easy one to do with stuff that you probably already have at home. So I hope you like this video. And if you did like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell to get notifications when I post new videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. I thought the camera, because it was on, was recording, and it wasn't recording. So you're going to catch me in the middle of the process. Okay. We're here in my kitchen, and we're going to naturally dye. Okay. All right, so our dye has been simmering for, I said all right again. Our dye has been, good?